You're listening to the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues podcast, a platform for meaningful conversations on governance, democracy, and development. From policy discussions to citizen perspectives, we explore key topics like electoral reforms, economic policies, and human rights. Join the conversation on YouTube, Spotify, and our website. Stay informed, stay inspired.
Hello, I am Dr. Kujo Asante, Director of Policy Engagement and Partnerships here at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD-Ghana. Welcome to the second episode of the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues. In today's episode, we are discussing the topic, a new sub-regional order, Ghana's response to Traore and the Sahelian Exit. We have a stellar panel for today, and it is my pleasure and honor to introduce first Ambassador Francis Chega, retired, CDD-Ghana Senior Fellow, career diplomat, and former Ghana Ambassador to Spain. Madam Lavinia Adai-Mensah, Executive Director, the West Africa Network for Peace Building, WANEP, and the first female director of WANEP ever. And Dr. Emma Benkrine, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping and Training Center, KIPTC. And not the last, Paul Osei-Kufuor, Network Coordinator, the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADEMOS, and Program Manager at CDD-Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, you are very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, on the 9th of December 2024, the Electoral Commission of Ghana declared former President Mahama then as the winner of the 2024 presidential elections in Ghana. As president-elect, the first acts he performed was to visit Ghana's neighboring countries, Nigeria, Togo, Benin. But he also visited Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and Guinea-Bissau. It was also an opportunity to extend invitation to all the heads of states that he visited for his inauguration on 7 January 2025. As we now know, the inauguration was attended by a high number of heads of states and dignitaries from across the world. In particular, the inauguration was attended by the military rulers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, where the 37-year-old Captain Traore of Burkina Faso received the loudest cheer from the crowd that was gathered at the inauguration. Ironically, the event was billed as a celebration of constitutional democracy. Weeks after, the Alliance of Sahelian States, AES, comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, formally withdrew from ECOWAS on January 29, 2025, following the expiration of a one-year notice period as outlined in Article 91 of the ECOWAS Revised Treaty of 1993. A lot has happened in a relatively short time for both Ghana and the sub-region. And I want to start by asking, what is your initial reflection on all that has happened in just 1 month? Maybe I start with Ambassador first.
Wow. That's a very loaded question. Where do we start? Since we are talking of our neighbors, maybe we start with the foreign affairs. The president has done a lot within the last 3 weeks since he took over in international relations. Apart from the countries that you've mentioned that he visited, since its inauguration, he has visited other countries, both bilaterally on visits, but in most cases on the multilateral level. He went to Kenya. That was part of the AU process. He's been to Tanzania. And I think this week he's going to Addis for the AU meeting. I think 1 or 2 other leaders too have come to visit. He has talked to a lot of the major diplomatic missions in Ghana. I've seen him that he's visited the Chinese embassy, he's contacted the American ambassador. But more importantly, in the respect of our economic affairs, which for him, I think is his main thing, he's been doing a lot in terms of trying to put together the promises that he's made in the course of the campaign in order to reset the what he could call resetting in the country. He has formed his cabinet, which is a record. I think the parliament has helped him in that respect. Both the majority and minority have cooperated, mainly in his forming the cabinet. So on the whole, I mean, and for me, I think the feeling in the country is that things are looking a little bit up. The general mood among the population is that we've probably passed the worst, and that things can only get a little bit better. So I will say that so far he has not done badly.
Okay. Well, thank you. Maybe continue with you, Paul. What's your initial impression? Because there's a lot that's happening in the sub-region. There's a lot that's happening in Ghana at the same time. They are connected somehow, but what, as a network coordinator for Vademos, with all what you have been following for many years now, what's your initial reaction to what has happened just in the last couple of weeks?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Santi. The couple of weeks that we've witnessed has produced a lot of fascinating scenarios for us. As Wademos, initially when we took notice of the indication of these countries to exit, we started having conversation as to how we can support the ongoing mediation efforts that ECOWAS at that time had triggered. And just to draw back a little bit, when these countries decided to exit ECOWAS, ECOWAS on its own deployed two main envoys, the president of Senegal and the president of Togo. And through them, they nominated special envoys to mediate with the countries. So the expectation was that there will be some kind of reversal of the decision, but knowing very well that this decision is also political on the part of these AES countries, because bringing them back under the banner of the ECOWAS protocols and norms will make it difficult to elongate power. So there was a bit of a mixed expectations around the possible outcome of the mediation efforts. Lo and behold, January 29th, there was an exit, and ECOWAS accepted the exit. For us as Wademos, what was quite good for us, ECOWAS reconciliatory gesture towards the ES countries, in the sense that they have allowed a 6-month transition window, and I think that is quite commendable, so that within that 6-month transition window, they can iron out a possible roadmap for the exit. But I must also indicate that the efforts on the part of Ghana by the new president to deploy a special envoy to the AES countries is also quite commendable, in the sense that this will go a long way to complement ongoing mediation efforts by Togo and Senegal. So generally, I must say that it's evolving, but so far we've not hit a snag.
Okay. Thank you very much. Lavinia, let me come. Thank you very much. Lavinia, let me come to you. What's your take? I know WANEP have been close to these developments. So now that it's happened, but coincidentally, there's also a lot that is happening in Ghana in terms of foreign policy. What's your initial reaction or reflection on what has happened in the last couple of weeks?
Well, thank you, Dr. Santi. I think the word that comes to my mind, and I keep repeating in my mind, is interesting, very interesting, very, very interesting. And indeed, a lot has happened. And I think we're really traversing some rather uncharted waters, let me put it that way. A lot of unprecedented dynamics. I think first we have on the Ghana front, We have a former president. We've never had a former president come back into power. I mean, after he's been in opposition, come back into power. While he was in opposition, of course, he was also engaged in a number of international endeavors. But he's come back as president, and in one breath, you would see tendencies of wanting to continue what he did then. But then times have changed, and so how does he transition, into a new era with new dynamics? Particularly on the regional front, where we are seeing the democratic backsliding and regional fragmentation, and yet knowing that Ghana's foreign policy has always been one that is geared more towards regionalism and good neighborliness and so on. But with the tensions that exist, so how do we manage that sort of, again, transition into the new era of fragmentation? Beyond the regional fragmentation, which is mainly around ECOWAS, even at bilateral level, there are a number of tensions that exist between various countries in the region. And so how do we move forward, or how does Ghana, with the current president having had a different set of experience previously, now move us forward in terms of placing us within these new dynamics? And so that's what makes me say it's really interesting. And of course, we've seen some of the initiatives that have been undertaken on the Ghana front, and colleagues have also mentioned on the ECOWAS front. Well, both Ghana front and ECOWAS front, we are seeing some sense of goodwill coming from ECOWAS towards the AES. But really, it's a case of fait accompli. So really, one wouldn't have expected anything else. And so the Ghana's goodwill, as we have seen, I think first from the visits that you mentioned, but more importantly, the appointment of the special envoy in the specific case of the AES countries. I think while it's good and we are all commending it, I think it raises some, not concerns, but it's important to highlight the need to be circumspect with some of these engagements on the basis of goodwill. And I say that to refer to, again, how Togo has played itself out around this whole AES withdrawal. While it was initially seen as positive, people are beginning to question the intentions. And I think it's important also for Ghana then to bear that in mind, that while it is looking to first for itself, and nobody can fault us for being selfish in terms of engaging with AES countries, but also seeing how that can help serve as some kind of a launch pad for, rapprochement between AES countries and ECOWAS as a bloc. But it's important that as Ghana does that, it also looks for avenues to engage ECOWAS as a complementary strategy. Because already, some antennas are already going up to say, okay, why is Ghana doing this, and what are Ghana's intentions? Let's go back and remember again when Ghana engaged in Accra initiative. Again, Ghana got some backlash after a while. Initially was embraced, but after a while, Ghana got a backlash that, well, this is coming from a very selfish place, and people were not really seeing the benefits at a regional level. So let's pay attention to that. We need to be intentional about that. And these are my initial thoughts for now.
Well, really, thank you. That's there's a lot of issues that you have touched on that I think we'll come back to. Dr. Binkrine, I'll take your initial thoughts, but there are aspects of these development, particularly, the implications on security, development, trade, all kinds of issues. But we'll come back to that. But maybe let me take your initial thoughts first.
All right. Thank you so much, Kojo, for this initiative. And good afternoon once again to my senior colleagues. Good afternoon once again to my senior colleagues, Ambassador Chega, Paul, my in-law Lavinia, for these initial thoughts. Really, they really set out the discussions, and I can only add to it. And maybe take us back several years, maybe a few decades, to how ECOWAS has operated and how it has sought to tackle insecurity in the region. First of all, ECOWAS has always operated on consensus, right? They don't vote. So the heads of state meet, they all agree, there's consensus, they decide, and then they move forward. The other thing also is about agency of its leaders. Now, you've seen in the past where you had leaders in the sub-region who could command their fellow leaders to do the right thing. Some names come to mind, obviously. Basanjo, Jerry Rawlings. So that is how they, so when something was going wrong, you had leaders that said, well, elderly statesmen, elderly leaders who could call their fellow heads of states to order. And they also helped the region to rally themselves around a common cause. This is what we are currently lacking in ECOWAS. Let's look at the heads of state that we have now. We have Nigeria, right? So President Tinubu is still president. I think he was recently elected for a second term.
A second term, yeah.
Chairperson of ECOWAS. He has so many problems at the national level that honestly ECOWAS is no priority for him. We look at Benin, President Talon. We look at Burkina Faso. Okay, let's leave the three out, right? Let's look at the constitutional democracy ones. Adama already is questionable because he's manipulated his constitution a few times. If we look at Guinea-Bissau, has its own issues, isn't it? Ivory Coast, obviously now he doesn't have any credibility at the moment because of how he has manipulated his constitution, and he's probably going to go another term. Liberia is still finding its feet. Togo, Lavinia mentioned it, how he sought to help us, but, he turned around and is almost throwing sand in our garifs, if I can say it that way. Sierra Leone also has its own national issues because they are grappling with their post-elections crisis. So he's at the moment, regional issues are not his priority. Dakar possibly, but Basiru Faye is young, and within our culture, if you are young, no matter how strong your economy is, when it comes to at the regional level, your voice is not heard much. So he probably needs to grow a little bit before he can have that influence, which is where possibly President Mahama comes in. Now, President Mahama has been head of state before. He has lost an election. He left the scene peacefully. And even after he left, he supported the transitional processes in the Gambia, right? And he was one of those heads of state that went to the Gambia to say, well, losing an election is not the end of it all, right? So he is in a position to rally his fellow heads of state around. He has that agency. He has less, less baggage, if I could say that. I know we have national issues, economic issues, but I think he can be the voice. He can be that person, or Ghana can be that country that says, well, we know that we are facing crisis in the region, but let's not lose what we have. Let's face it, if you look at some of the other regional economic communities, they all looked up to ECOWAS at a particular point in time. ECOWAS was the benchmark, even for the African Union.
Sure.
And at the moment, ECOWAS is the one that is struggling the most. And so it's important that Ghana as, do they call us a beacon of democracy? I'm not
Some
sure.
people still do.
People still do. So for those that still do, let's not disappoint them, because the crisis of leadership that we are having in the region is something that we shouldn't take for granted. And I think he could be the person that, because these three countries have the heads of states now, maybe hold him in a certain reverence, he can bring them back on board to ECOWAS. The broader discussion around whether they come back to ECOWAS or not, I mean, that's a longer discussion. But I think obviously ECOWAS has norms, right? Yeah. And if you want to be a member of ECOWAS, you need to abide by those norms. Democracy, good governance, you have to organize elections, those sorts of things. And if they are to come back to ECOWAS, can ECOWAS say that they are going to let go of those norms and let them back on board?
Yeah. Well, it's one of the issues I want to
exactly explore. So those are discussions that can be had.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that. I want to come back to our foreign policy issues and back to Ambassador, because you have been a career diplomat, but you've also served on the advisory board of the foreign ministry and so on. So there's definitely an enthusiasm that President Mahama is showing in sort of stepping into what Lavinia describes as fragmentation, uncharted territory. Anybody that's touched this has been bent one way or the other, and with all the movements that are going on. But he's jumping to this, enthusiastically. He's appointed a special envoy. He has done all these trips. All these people have gathered. They've come for his inauguration. He has appointed a very young, foreign minister, our youngest foreign minister, who you can say, yes, he had some experience as a ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. But given the kind of issues that are unraveling, what do you think the strategy is for the Mahama presidency entering into this? Because yes, it's a sub-regional issue about security, about trade, about all of that. What is the strategy for the Mahama, or what do you think the strategy is? You can only speculate, or informed speculation, I would say.
A foreign minister has just assumed.
Yeah.
When I saw the three military leaders at the
inauguration, yeah,
my initial reaction is, what are we doing?
Yes.
But after reflection, I thought, and knowing that he has, first of all, I assumed that he would not have come, even if he invited them, without him informing his colleagues, ECOWAS leaders that so they will be there. They all knew. And what I'm hearing from Nigeria now is that Tinubu himself is making gestures to us
through him,
especially to Traore, that he has spoken to Traore and Mali Basin. So I think the decision to enter and then the appointment of the special representative.
Has his own antecedents in the military.
Own problems, his antecedents, but a very good negotiator, a very good communicator. So I suspect they are going, now that the foreign service team is in place, they are going to work with the ECOWAS. And it looks ECOWAS itself has made, I will not call it a U-turn, but they are a little bit more conciliatory to
after the threats
in foreign policy you use diplomacy to execute your foreign policy, and diplomacy is all based on negotiation. Coercive force is the last resort, but ECOWAS started with the last resort, the threatening to invade, and I mean, when we all want even the UN, you talk of peaceful means of resolution of dispute. So I think that was a strategic mistake that ECOWAS made, and they are trying to draw back and pull back and this thing. So the next few months is going to be very critical. We cannot talk about these things by limiting ourselves to only the region. Yeah. What is happening internationally definitely going to play some part, you know, because let's face it, what's happened in the three states could have gone a different way if, as some of us, you know, feel France had not gotten itself involved too much in the matter. I think that led to them taking very radical Macron's position, what he said, and his whole attitude made the young men even more this thing, and it helped ginger internal support, because the good thing about these people, as of now, they have the majority of their people supporting them in the actions that they have taken. So what they can always argue that they are doing what they are doing in their national interest. So we have to take that also into consideration. The next few months, this 6 months window that we have, will probably depend on how, as Dr. Ibrahim Traore said, Mahama is able to put himself at the center of the negotiation. As I said, he's probably the most credible leader now in ECOWAS. I remember some years back, as I said, one particular incident that General Abacha wanted to take a particular decision, and Jerry, you know, wanted to intervene. He sent by who was then the foreign minister, and then I was with him. We went to Ayadema, we went to Benin, and just to consult those, and Ayadema gave us an interesting perspective as to how we should approach Abacha. That when you go, don't tell him to do this. If you tell him to do that, he will want to show you that he's also a strong man. So there was that sort of, and they were all very experienced leaders at that time, and they could call each other, they could talk to each other, and the others respected them. So, but now that is no
that dynamic is
that
not,
dynamic is not there. So depending on how President Mahama plays his card, what he think through whatever he wants to do, consults his leaders, so that even though they will not be in a position to be upfront, he knows that they are supporting him. And then we will see what will happen.
Lavinia, what is the motivation for President Mahama in really making this move? Because is that I mean, is it a question of security in Ghana's case? Is it just peaceful neighborliness? You know, our mantra, good neighborliness, when Kufuor, you know, sort of affirmed our long-standing approach to, you know, foreign policy. What do you think is the motivation for President Mahama? And is this just a personal motivation, or this is a party, you know, approach? Is the party buying into this, or this is his personal sort of commitment or a legacy issue for him?
Well, I'm glad you quickly said, what do I think? Because initially you said, what is the motivation? Because he hasn't given me any decision yet. So
I know you have a prophetic instinct.
So I can only speculate here, but I think well, genuinely, I think this goes beyond Mahama as a person.
Okay.
I think, again, it's in line with some of the policy orientations as a nation. It could be the drive behind it, or part of the drive behind it. As I mentioned earlier, the whole regionalism component, a bit of the Pan-Africanist, tendencies that
That's
also
true.
upheld. And it's one of the things that the three countries, AES countries, have touted, in terms of taking back their countries away from neocolonialism and so on and so forth. So there could be bits and bobs of that. But I think in terms of motivation, going back to Emma's analysis, and I think she was spot on in terms of the leadership crisis. I think for me, I keep referring in various conversations to the inauguration. I think it was such a huge statement in terms of a unanimous expectation or conferring of leadership on Mahama. It's a statement of, look, you are our leader. Even beyond the region, it was very clear, and most of it is the experience that he's coming with. Age is a factor. I think Emma also referred to that. We can't run away from that in this region. There's such huge experience compared to others who are on the scene, So I think that with that sort of goodwill, I think it also served as a motivation. But particularly looking at the three countries, AES countries, within the AES confederation itself, Burkina Faso seems to have emerged as the leader of the three.
Which I find that I thought Mali was, or is it that Burkina Faso is more of the poster boy for the AES?
He's more of the poster boy. I think he is the one with also the least legacies in terms of the room that foreign powers have had to sort of engage in Burkina. So Mali has had a lot of baggage of foreigners. Niger has had that. Burkina was less limited. So I think he's had more room to maneuver and move his country forward. Mali has been dealing with offloading the baggage. Burkina Faso has been trying to move forward, innovation, and of course the youth component also comes in. So he's emerged as a natural leader for the three countries. And I think for President Mahama, in addition to these three countries particularly see him as a father figure. Apart from just being a leader, he's also like a father that they can come to, particularly Burkina Faso and the northern ties. We can't run away from that. So that is also there. And in a number of his campaign speeches, he had made reference to, that connection with countries, particularly Burkina, and the complicated nature of the ethnic cultural ties between Ghana and Burkina in that part of the country. I think it's also key for dealing with a number of the tensions and conflicts that even exist in Ghana. And so I think those were some of his motivations, if I were to speculate. And coming back again to this role that he's taking on, let's also not forget that he's coming with experience from ECOWAS, having served at some point as the chairman.
Chairman.
And I think during that time we had seen some significant improvements. There were some gains in terms of dealing with the Boko Haram issue and so on. So I think he feels he can ride on some of those experiences, to address what is also a threat to Ghana. And so these are all things that are motivating him to do that. And broadly, people also have spoken to him. During the inauguration, I kept I don't know which station you were watching, but I was watching TV3, and
I was at the inauguration, so at least I saw it firsthand.
Those of us who watched TV, we benefited from particular stations. We benefited from the mic being on. So that
yes.
The chit chats he was having with some of the leaders, we heard them, and you could see a certain level of reverence, from the leaders that were coming to him. And so for me, it's like we're looking to you to help build trust. If you do the analysis in the region, where is the biggest issue of trust? Is the AES and the rest.
That's right.
Even though, so that's what is in the, that's what has occupied the discourses, even though there are deeper trust issues, between Benin and its neighbors, so on and so forth. So, but that's one of the main ones that's a focus. So again, in terms of people telling him that, look, we are looking up to you to help the region, he feels that maybe this is one of the main ones that he can start with, without presenting it as a regional initiative, but more as a Ghana initiative to build that relationship first and leverage on that to now look at the broader regional stability and trust building.
Okay. All right. No, thanks very much for that. Now, Paul, so there's this sort of window where ECOWAS is signaling to the AES country that they should use it to rethink their decisions. And then they've made all these gestures willing to ensure free movement of people, security cooperation, trade cooperation. We don't have the details yet, and there's still a lot about what this post-exit framework will look like. Now, what of course is a huge contradiction is that the supplementary protocol on democracy, good governance, completely upholds, unconstitutional changes in government. But it looks like these AES countries, there will be a point where these military leaders will want to stay, in complete contradiction to what commitments that are made under the protocol. How does ECOWAS kind of, address this? Are they going to treat this as a one-off thing that they put aside, or it's a very complicated process about defending the principle and dealing with the reality on the ground. So what's your, and maybe in just short time, just give us your own thoughts about what is likely to happen around these post-exit framework negotiations, and really how even ECOWAS moves forward beyond what has happened with the AES countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asante. Lavina did mention earlier that we are in an uncharted territory, and it requires deep reflection and thinking for us to be able to transition beyond the current state that we find ourselves. I think ECOWAS itself is celebrating its significant milestone.
50 years,
50 years since its establishment. Yeah. And if you cast your mind back to the formation of ECOWAS, at the entry point was the issue of economic integration, it was trade. But at a point in time, there was an addition of promoting issues around political governance, and then to complement issues of security in the sub-region. If you look at ECOWAS' journey so far, there's been a lot of, and timely in terms of responding to sub-regional matters. There's been concerns around how ECOWAS has deployed sanctions as a tool to demand compliance to its norms and protocols. So the institution is facing challenges, and I think this is the time for it to take a deep dive and review some of the protocols that they deployed over time. As you said, they have their values, but the reality has also brought them to check. How do you converge your realities and the values that you want to advance? And what kind of ECOWAS do you even want to aspire? There are concerns around the ECOWAS court, which brings out ruling, but it's largely defined by countries. There are concerns about the composition of the ECOWAS parliament, which doesn't even reflect the views of ordinary citizens of the community. And ECOWAS itself has come to the admission that a critical organ, which is the ECOSOC, still remains non-functional. So I will advise, and I think that ECOWAS should accept the exit, because where we are, it's a difficult situation for them, but these are the realities. The people who want to enjoy power, they've tasted power, they want to stay in power.
It's like cut the arm off, be free.
Yes, cut the
otherwise
arm
you
off,
get infected.
And but you have 12 other countries that are still in ECOWAS. Start the conversation of the future of ECOWAS, and I think ECOWAS has even indicated that they want to hold a future summit to begin to reimagine the future and the way forward for ECOWAS. One area that I will suggest for ECOWAS to maintain cooperation with the AES countries has to do with the issues of security. And this has been elaborated strongly among the panelists that we have. Because if you look at recently, Benin had an attack, and the littoral countries have had a shield from the Sahelian countries. So we must find a way to support the security arrangement and coordination mechanism. The failure of MINUSMA and the G5 Sahel and all others. ECOWAS exit plan should make sure that security is highly integrated. And I think their effort to emphasize the standby force is quite critical. Then economic relations also remain very important. Because if you look at the data, there's a lot of cross-border trade among these countries. Even there are some parts of Ghana that is difficult to even draw the border. So it's difficult to create a strict separation. You need that interconnectedness and interconnectivity between these countries. They've been 3 key members of ECOWAS. So economic relations must also be well defined. And as for the political, it's going to be difficult, but there are no more under ECOWAS unless the authority of heads of states decides, the 12 member countries decide that we are all going to engage with these countries using the economic and security as an entry point to build on issues around political values and norms. Because we are seeing serious human rights violations and internally displaced people, humanitarian crisis. These can cause the migration of refugees to our countries and all that.
Well, I'm running out of time, but Dr. Bingrai, as if what Paul has enumerated is not enough, we are in a multipolar world where everybody's in Africa. Big powers, middle powers, small powers, all with their interests, their resources. We know in particular in the Sahelian states, Russia is very strong, and it's deepening its roots there, and so on and so forth. How does Ghana, ECOWAS, navigate all these, different dynamics that are at play currently?
Thank you so much, Kojo, and thank you also to, again, my co-panelists for these thoughts. I mean, I think hearing what you're saying about all these actors in the region is a bit like when you place a child in a candy shop, right?
You think it's a candy? Well, if it's candy, that will be happy if it's candy.
Yes. And for me, I think that's how I want to look at it, right? It's up to that child to determine which of the candies to go for first, or which one will benefit them the most, right? Do you go for the nearest? Do you go for the farthest? Do you go for the biggest? Do you go for the smallest? Do you go for the sweetest? So I would say, and I'm trying to look at it positively, that we might be, or we are spoiled for choice, in the sense that, first of all, as African countries or as West African countries, we need to look at our own agency within this, because all those actors that are coming into the region are also looking at their own agency, what they need, what they want. Can we also look critically and determine what we think we can get out of all these actors? I mean, the traditional partners are still there, and we have the non-traditional ones who are also still there. So it's important, first of all, that as member states, we decide what we want out of them. And then we can leverage on what we have to get what we want. The other thing, Kojo, that I want to emphasize is, we've been talking about, and then we can leverage on what we have to get what we want. The other thing, Kojo, that I want to emphasize is, we've been talking about ECOWAS. Mm-hmm. But, I think we need the technocrats and the bureaucrats who essentially are the messengers, right? The implementers of the decisions that are taken by the heads of state. And then we have Lavinia's people, Lavinia and Paul's people, the ECOWAS of the people, isn't it? We ourselves, the citizens. Now, we need, in differentiating between all of them, that is where we will know, okay, this is what the people need, or this is what the people want. As for the commission, they are messengers, but we go back to the authority. And you see that when the authority of heads of state is failing, that is when we have problems at the commission. Because for those at the commission, they are only messengers. It is only what the heads of state ask them to do that they do. The commission cannot do anything. So, for example, when Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security gave the statement that in Niger, they are going to intervene in Niger, he wasn't speaking of his own will. And I think sometimes we misinterpret it and say, well, it was Commissioner Political Affairs, Peace and Security that was, warmongering and said they were going to fight in Niger. He was a messenger. And I think those messages were even also transmitted by the president of Nigeria. So I think it's important that we differentiate the three ECOWASs, right? The authority, the commission, and the people. The people is you and I. And so sometimes we need to go back to the people, because sometimes it is what the people want that the heads of states do. So, for example, in Ghana, we have voted in President Mahama. He's president of Ghana. Now, what do we want President Mahama to do in West Africa? How do we think we want him to channel our issues across the borders? What do we need? How do we want to relate with our fellow Togolese or Burkinabes or Ivorians? And I think sometimes we give too much power to the authority, which is the head of state. We forget the power that the citizens have. And oftentimes it is the power that the citizens have that the heads of states ride on.
Yeah.
So we find that during the coup d'etat in these 3 or 4 countries, the citizens were demonstrating against ECOWAS. And that is what gave these heads of states the impetus to say, well, we don't want ECOWAS anymore. So if you went to Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and I think even Guinea, there was a strong anti-ECOWAS sentiment, right? And that is the problem. It means ECOWAS needs to go back to the citizens and make itself relevant to the citizens. Find out what the citizens need. Now, there are lots of changes happening. We talked about the revising its norms and protocol. I mean, there's a lot of changes. So I think Lavinia or Bemia, the last couple of months, there's a version of their protocol, the supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance that has been going around the member states. They have done revisions in it, but it is the member states that have to accept it. So the commission has made revisions. they have sent it to the member states. It is up to the member states to say, well, okay, this is what we agreed to. But there are certain member states that haven't sent it back to ECOWAS, right? So there are all kinds of issues that I think come to the fore, but I'll leave it here for now.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Dr. Binkwai. And basically, I've run out of time, but the matters that all of you have put on the table, it's something that we have to return to as the events unfold. Maybe to return to your candy shop analogy, just to say that we either select well, or we eat up all the candy and then we get sick, and that might not be good for us. So we need all of the skill and experience to sort of navigate, but as you said, uncharted territory. So, but once again, let me thank you we hope that we'll reconnect again on this subject of Ghana's foreign policy and what is emerging in terms of the sub-regional order. So you have been listening to the episode 2 of the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues.
Thank you for listening to the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues podcast. Stay engaged, stay informed, and be part of the conversation on governance, democracy, and development. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and visit our website for more insightful discussions.